You're watching Roll for Crit, and we're here to bring you our review of the Castles of Burgundy 20th Anniversary Edition. Classic game, well renowned from designer Stefan Feld. It takes place in the region of Burgundy in France, and each player is attempting to build up their personal settlement the best they can by taking tiles from the board and arranging them in ways that will get them more points than any other player. As I said, this is the 20th Anniversary Edition, so it includes a number of expansions that were previously available separately. There are some slight tweaks to some of the rules and namings of certain tiles and things, and the colors and components have been altered in some small ways here and there, but generally speaking, it is the same game of Castles of Burgundy that everyone knows and loves.
Now, if you are new to this, we'll quickly explain how the game works. On your turn, you're going to roll your 2 dice, and whoever is the first player gets the honor of rolling this white die. So everyone will roll, and depending on your turn order, which you can see in the top corner, you are going to be able to use your dice for these actions. Before that first, you're going to look at the white die, look at the number, take the most top good, and put it in that depot. Then, starting with who's on top or farthest, so currently the black player, they're going to be able to use their 2 dice to take different actions. Now, depending on the value, you can do certain things within those actions. Take a tile from a depot with a matching number. So in this case, you could use the 4 die to take one of these 4 tiles, or the 1 die to take one of those 4 tiles. You will take the tile and add it to your little collection in the bottom right corner of your map. Now, you also have the option to place the tiles in your little supply onto your actual board. You're going to need to match the number and color with the hex. So for example, right now, with a 4 and a 1, there really isn't much I can build with the tiles I have. But let's say I had a 3 and a 2 for this case. I could use the 3 to build this church in this spot here. It has to be touching a hex that is already built. Or I could use the 2 to build the boat over here. I could use both of them to build both of them, whatever the case may be. You can also use your dice to sell goods. Similar to the good I placed out earlier, you'll be able to collect more of these goods. You'll have them over here in your corner. And depending on the numbers you roll, you can sell that good. So to sell this 1 good, you need a 1. To sell these 2 goods, which are the same type, you need a 6. You only need 1 die to sell 1 kind. You don't need 2 6s to sell both of these. When you sell those goods, you'll get some victory points depending on the number of goods you sold. Plus, you'll get a coin, which lets you actually use a bonus action. For you see, in addition to the 2 dice you have, you can use 2 coins, possibly for other things, but mostly to buy from the center of the board. These will be changed each round, and they could have additional tiles, so in case other players already took the castle spots, or maybe some special tiles that only appear in the black ones, like some of these yellow ones, or in this case, this is a little expansion tile. We'll get to a little bit more later, but geese. But let's say, like before, I had the 2 and the 3 that I couldn't really use. You can give up one of your dice to gain 2 workers. Now, these workers are very nice because you can spend 1 worker to add or subtract a value on a die. So in that previous case, I could spend 1 die to get a worker, to get 2 workers, then spend 1 of those workers to change my other die to a 2 to place that boat. It's sort of a way to help you mitigate bad luck on your rolls.
That covers the general flow of your turns, but what you're going to be thinking about for the most part as the game goes on is how things are influenced by the tiles that you choose. Each one of those tiles has its own effect, and as soon as you place it, generally, there are some exceptions, but most of them have an effect that triggers as soon as you place it onto your personal mat. There are a lot of them, and we're not going to go over every single one, but we'll cover the basics of how each different type works. So first there are castles, which are the dark green ones, and those are pretty simple. They let you take an extra action of your choice with any die result that you'd like. Then there are the silver or gray mine tiles. These generate coins. At the end of each round, for each mine that you have on your board, you will receive 1 coin. A great way to get revenue so you can buy things from the center. Ships are very important. If you place a ship on a blue space, first you get to take goods from one of the depots on the board. That's why it's important where those goods go at the beginning of each round. You can only hold up to 3 different types of goods at a time, so if they're more than that, then you have to leave them there, but you can have an unlimited amount of the same color of goods. So you want to try to get as many as you can to make the turns where you sell goods more valuable for you. When you place a ship, you also get to move up one space on the bridge track. So this is a great way for you to move yourself up in turn order. Very important because you want to try to get the tiles you want before anyone else can take them. Livestock tiles simply get you points for the number of animals depicted on them. Finally, there are buildings and monasteries, and these are where a lot of the different effects come into play. They can give you effects ranging from allowing you to take tiles from the board, play tiles from your own mat for free, maybe ways for you to get extra workers, extra coins, all kinds of things that are really where some of that asymmetry will come into play between you and other players that will develop potentially sort of little engines for you or just directions you'll want to move in based on what effects those have. So this is obviously, looking at it, even if you haven't played it before, I think it's pretty obvious you can tell this is a Euro game. It's very much that old school kind of look and feel. Even with this new updated edition of it, they did not shy away from that aesthetic of European castles and all that kind of thing. But within that game, I mean, there's a lot of dice rolling, but there are also, it's very easy, I think, to either mitigate them with the workers, as we said, or to kind of change your tactics up on the fly. And of course, you're also very much worried about what other players are doing and which places they're going, where they're taking things. Almost has the feeling of a worker placement game when you want to go to a space before anyone else can, except that you don't actually have workers, and it's the first come first serve is simply because they took a tile that you wanted before you could get
right.
it.
No, I mean, many people, when you mention rolling dice, they definitely don't go to Euros with that.
Right.
But I think because the worst case scenario, you get Monopoly when you roll dice, and that's just what you have. In this, because of the workers, honestly, a lot of the times, especially when you get a little bit later into the game, when you start building up some workers in your reserve, you start thinking like, okay, I rolled a 2 and a 6, but if I spend one worker to the 5, I can then get the castle and use the 2 to place the castle, which then in turn gives me an extra action to allow me to do something else. And you think it starts to chain more. And I think that's when you have dice rolling and you have that much control over your dice, it really removes the randomness that might sour other people in that kind of mechanic. Outside of that, it's definitely, as you said, very Euro.
Yeah, you can almost get some of those turns like in a game of Magic or a deck builder where you might end up comboing like 4 different moves. Like, this gives me an extra action, and this one lets me complete this, so I got points for that, and then I can do this. Which I think isn't the kind of thing you usually see in most Euro games. So to me, it does stand out in that regard. It's definitely got that point salad thing going on. So
yeah.
A lot of different stuff on the board, a lot of different ways for you to take things and score points. Mm-hmm. It can kind of maybe be a little bit, especially when you first start playing, it can definitely be overwhelming trying to keep track and remember all these different tile types and what they do. Fortunately, like your die rolls limit you a little. Like, okay, I don't need to look at maybe this depot or that depot right now. But yeah, when you get deeper into it, you're going to want to know what everything does, and there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of a lot of points with point salad, they give you a token for when you cross not just 100, but 200. So prepare for some high scores.
We had a game where you almost hit 300.
Almost.
So,
but going aside, like we said, this is a 20th anniversary edition, which includes some of the expansions and some rule tweaks that or make it a little different from the original old base. For example, we mentioned the geese are now just a part of this. There are some other things, including these inns, I think they're called. I don't know if they were called inns in the old one. I know a couple of things because I actually found an older reference sheet I got confused about because I think these used to be called knowledge tiles.
Right, correct.
But there are also these shields, which if you roll doubles, once again going back to Monopoly, you can have the chance to purchase them and add them to your board. They have an upkeep, but they have some very significant, strong abilities.
Yeah, another one that we really enjoyed were the trade routes. And those are interesting because they really affect what you want to sell. They'll be laid out randomly. And if you happen to sell the right color to the next upcoming space on your route, or route, however you want to say it, then you'll get a bonus for that as well. And I really enjoyed those. And in general, a lot of the tiles you might see on the board it can just be mixed in, those expansion tiles. Most of them, I think, aren't too intrusive and it makes sense to include them all. The trade route definitely changes things, but I think for the better. The shields are the one that I think, to me, are ones that you don't want to play with unless you have advanced players at the table or you've played it a lot of times and you really want to change things up, because they can significantly shift the way the game plays.
I would agree with that. Honestly, most of the tiles, like, the geese, the inns, they're like, they change so little. It's like they're there and they can make a difference to your score, but it's not a significant rules layer you have to add to what you're thinking about what to do, which is a lot considering it's a point salad. But definitely the trade route and the shields are ones that you maybe want to not use your first game. And depending on how you feel about them, you can try them out later and see if you want to add them all at once or just consider it like modules and add what you liked.
I also tried out the solo mode in this one, which I enjoyed quite a bit. In that one, you are just trying to complete all the spaces on your personal mat, and there is a simulation where each round one of the tiles is randomly removed. So rather than a player taking a tile, you have to worry about that happening. And I enjoyed it. The one thing about that, as well as even with multiple players, is there's kind of a lot of upkeep, and every round you have to clear the board and then put back the tiles onto the right places that they need to go. And remember, what the white die is and how that affects the goods and all these things. And I know there have been a lot of complaints from people, longtime fans of Castles, about some of the choices in terms of the colors and the design updates to the tiles and the board in general. And for the most part, I think it's okay. There are a few choices that I think they could have made better and made things easier to see. But I don't think it's necessarily a game breaker, but it isn't. I wouldn't say it's the prettiest game. There are some things like maybe this particular light shade of green could have been something a little nicer with next to this bright yellow sort of thing. But that's a personal aesthetic opinion of mine.
Crits and misses for Castles of Burgundy.
Crits. For a game that relies so heavily on dice rolling, you would think that this would be a pure luck fest, but it still maintains the core feeling of a classic Euro game with a lot of different ways for you to mitigate those rolls. There are a huge variety of tile types with their own unique effects, and while it can be overwhelming at first to get a grasp on all of them, it means there are many different ways for you to score points, even if your opponents manage to take the tiles you were originally going for.
Although there are tiles I will prefer to pick up first or different strategies that I enjoy, I never really felt like I was closed off from doing any different kind of strategy that would earn me significant victory points.
The 20th anniversary edition of the game comes with a whole host of expansions that you can mix and match and put into your games, including new types of tiles, the trade routes, as well as all new mats for you to play at with different designs and layouts for your duchies.
As a person who likes to collect all of the mechanically significant components and expansions, it's nice to be able to buy one box that has it all. Misses. As we stated earlier, this is a point salad kind of game, and as with a lot of those kinds of games, and this one is no exception, there are a lot of fiddly bits which you need to add up, which can increase the time for scoring and also upkeep in rounds. It's the anniversary edition, and while we're very happy to be able to get all the components for the Castle of Burgundy line, the art and components didn't blow us out of the water.
Some of the components are simply difficult to read and to make out exactly what they do, meaning you're probably going to be referencing the rulebook or your reference sheet a lot to recall exactly what they're for, which is troublesome when there are so many. And generally speaking, we feel like they could have put a little more effort into the overall look and quality of the components for something that is called an anniversary edition. Going forward, I believe this is the edition of the game that they are going to have in print regularly. So if you want Castles of Burgundy and you don't have the old edition, this is what you're looking at. And considering that, I don't think it's bad by any stretch. In fact, I think it's a pretty nice little package. Again, it comes with all those expansions, which is really great, especially if you're new to the game. And I think that, people who are really attached to the original one, which also may or may not have been exactly perfect, have complaints with this in terms of the look and feel of the components and maybe some of those rules tweaks that they made. But I think that if you're new to the game or if you just aren't as bothered by those things, you probably won't even notice and you're still going to have a really good time playing it.
Yeah, we enjoyed it a lot. even during those times of waiting for Jonathan to put down the tiles again, or when we're slowly adding up our points. It's still really cool and fun because I like the dice manager because it's that you're not 100% sure what you're going to be able to do on your turn, but you probably can get something that you want, whether it's through getting a different tile later or mitigating with workers.
And it's just cool to have your own, your personal space where you're putting your tiles out, and I just enjoy that strategy of deciding, well, I have this number, so I could take that tile and put it here, or I could place both of these, but then do I risk that person taking the tile that I want? There's a lot of interesting decisions, especially with more players that get added. But even when 1 or 2 players, I think it works pretty well. I wonder what people out there watching think of Castles of Burgundy. Are you a fan from way back? Did you happen to pick up this new edition for the first time? And which of these expansions do you like? Do you mix them in when you feel like it? Or do you just throw everything all together all at once? Let us know in the comments section how you feel about it in general.
Until then, I'm Will.
I'm Jonathan.
And this has been a review of Castles of Burgundy. Catch the latest from Roll for Crit by liking and subscribing and supporting us on Patreon.
You're not a hidden traitor, are you? Come on, like us.